Welcome to the Nature's Image Farm podcast. We're glad you're here. I'm Greg.
And I'm Susan. And together we're raising 7 kids on the farm and learning life lessons along the way.
So pull up a chair, rest your heels, and let's talk all things bees, homesteading, and the old-time ways.
Let's get after it.
If you're interested in nukes, packages, queens, or supplies, visit us on the web at naturesimagefarm.com.
Well, hey guys, welcome back to another Stream Team Beekeeping Chat. Bruce, Brian, how's it going, fellas?
Hey.
Going good.
Sorry, we're running a little bit behind here.
Look at that.
Look at that. Would you look at that?
Look at that.
What is that, Brian?
That's product placement.
That looks like a grill cover.
It's your gray shirt.
Nice.
See, exactly. But it's on the back that way I
Look
can.
at that, Bruce. I went to look at that.
Look at this.
You guys are awesome.
I almost feel like I need to change real quick.
Well, sorry if you're listening to the replay later, the podcast later. If you're tuning in live, we appreciate you guys. It's just been an absolute chaos, really, the last 2 months. But I was a little late getting the stream put together, and then I got the camera and everything switched around. So you'll have to bear with me because it looks like I'm looking down and looking away, but it is what it is. We're glad to have you tonight. There's a lot of stuff going on this time of year. First and foremost, our thoughts and prayers are with all those who might be in the path of that hurricane coming through there. Hopefully everyone's staying dry. Your property is safe. Your bees are safe. And more importantly, you are safe. There's so many things that affect all of us one way or the other. Just because we might not be in the immediate path of those storms doesn't mean that there won't be some kind of repercussion later, either with rain or just these things kind of have a trickle effect. And so, again, hope everyone is doing well, everyone's safe. Fellas, tonight I thought we'd get into a little bit of, we're getting late in the year. We're almost the 1st of September. Brian was just out here at the learning yard, and I don't know, about 6:30 in the morning or so, Saturday, before everyone got here, I was out filling out 5-gallon buckets. And wouldn't you know, I saw the first flock of geese heading south. And it kind of just sent a little shiver up your spine because it's just one of those ready or not, here winter comes sort of thing. And you got to get ready. It's that time of year where as we hit July 4th and we start getting closer and closer and closer to winter time, in your mind, you're thinking, yeah, we're getting there. We'll be ready. We'll get it figured out. And then a little time passes, and the next thing you know, you're nearly the 1st of September. And you have got to ask yourself, well, am I ready for winter? Did I do all the things that I wanted to do? Did I make all the right choices? Are the bees healthy? And here we are late in the season, and there's still time to requeen, and there's still time to make some late season splits. So, fellas, I thought what we could talk about tonight is a late split and requeening strategy. I know we've talked about it a little bit in the past, but I thought maybe we could dial in on a couple of those components. If I can get to my phone, I'll dig out some photos and maybe send them to Brian the Wizard and see if he can get them on the screen. But that's what I was doing a little bit today, was getting some bucket feeders on and kind of doing some downsizing splits, getting things ready for some queens. And so I thought, it would be a good time to talk about that. So before we get going, Bruce and Brian, how's things going in your neck of the woods? Let's start with Bruce down in Dothan, Alabama. Bruce, how are things going down in Alabama?
Well, it's going okay. It's we're kind of in a little bit of a holding pattern with the bees right now. I haven't done much with them for, really 2 or 3 weeks since I put the treatments in them. I have been the ones that I'm thinking about possibly pulling some honey off of, some fall honey. I haven't been treating I didn't treat those with Apivar, obviously. I've been hitting them with some oxalic acid vapor just to kind of hopefully keep the mites in check. But other than that, really haven't done much. We've had my daughter and son-in-law here with, they just had a brand new baby. So we've been busy chasing the grandkids, holding the baby, chasing the toddler. And it's been a little busy around here with that. So I haven't been in the bees much at all, to be quite honest. I've done a little bit of straightening, getting things organized, and all the boxes, leftover boxes, dead outs, or excess of equipment that was just kind of hanging out in the bee yards is now hopefully stored. At least it's in the location where it needs to be stored and not all out in the bee yards laying around. And so just done a little work getting everything organized and hopefully put away. And now we're just going to be checking, kind of getting ready for winter, checking on the bees, cleaning up any dead outs we may have, or just trying to keep them healthy. And I need to probably look into feeding. I haven't been feeding. I've just kind of got a little behind on that, but we've had a little bit of a fall flow trickling in, I think, especially the bees that are near cotton. And so, well, actually a late summer flow with the cotton, but, they've been looking pretty good, but I need to get back out to some of the outlying bee yards and just see how they're doing.
Do you feel like you've got a good grip on where you want to be this time of year, Bruce?
Yeah, I think so. Actually, I think, I haven't been up to Ozark in about 2 or 3 weeks, but the ones I've checked in on are really probably as healthy as they've ever been. Overall, the health of the hives has been really quite good. The bee inspector actually went to one of my bee yards, the one up in Newton by the cell tower there on my uncle's land, and they went and did some inspections, a couple of bee inspectors, and they said my bees looked really strong there. And that was one of my yards I thought was, for a while, it was one of my weaker yards. And so they're kind of making a comeback, and I've got all the dead outs and stuff cleaned out of there. And so it looks a lot better. And the bees that are left behind seem to be doing pretty good. And so that's good news. But really just kind of a little bit behind as far as, like, I haven't been in them. So I don't know that I've kind of walked around, looked at the entrances, but I haven't inspected the colonies much lately. It's been so hot here. It's just been ridiculously hot. And just haven't done a lot with the bees. So,
Well, Brian, what about you? Where are you at this time of year? What's things looking like up in Northeast Ohio?
Yeah. Well, I tell you, this week, I wish I was out doing stuff. As soon as I had so much fun down in Hopewell, Ohio, that, then after that, I couldn't possibly do anything else. So I decided to get a little respiratory kind of whatever thing. I don't know whatever's going on. So I've been pumping cold meds all week, so I haven't done anything. But the bees, I think they're in a good spot. I think, but I need to get on top of it. I'm going to push myself tomorrow and get out and just check some things. I need to make sure that, I get my supers on. I probably am just going to put them on now, just because, like I was telling you, when you were up here, it's almost like you hit a certain area in Northeast Ohio and all of, like, the flowers just vanished, and I just, yesterday, my wife and I took our pup for a walk, and I just noticed the first, like, openings of goldenrod. So, and the bees were all over them. So, with that, with me seeing just those initial signs, I think I'm probably just going to say, heck with it. Let me get my supers on. That way I'm just ahead of that. But, right now, though, I've already seen, like, messages from, I'm sure everybody gets emails, everybody gets emails from everybody you've ever bought a product from. But I've seen the emails already, about prepping for the winter and things like that. So as soon as I get my supers out to try and get any bit of a fall flow, that's going to be my next step. I know I've expanded this year a little bit, so I need to get a count on how many insulated inner covers I need, just things like that. How many feeder shims do I need? Make sure all my I got buckets from you earlier in the year, so just make sure I have everything in line now, that when I pull my supers for the last time for the year, then I've got everything in place, because I don't want to scramble, end of September, when it's just going to be such a crucial time to, make sure that you got feed and everything on your colonies. I don't want to be scrambling and having to drive, at the last minute, calling you and saying, "Hey, Greg, I need this, I need that." So I just want to try and plan ahead this year. But, the colonies, they're so busy. I want to try and stay on top of them, as much as what I can. So they're keeping me on my toes, that's for sure. So for just being somebody with, a handful of colonies.
Do you
man,
think do you feel like you are where you want to be for this time of year?
I tell you, to me, it almost feels like I'm behind,
Yeah.
honest. It's just, but I think most beekeepers at this time of the year start to feel that way just because the season is winding down. We're going to be hitting September here in a couple days. And this is that critical time where, you're thinking about everything that you've done throughout the season. And, you're thinking, well, have I done enough to get these colonies through the winter? So I think everybody's brains are just running like crazy right now. Am I thinking too much? I might be. I'm really, I can't say that, any of my colonies. I think there's two that I might look at that I might just combine, just so that I have a larger colony. But all of the other ones, they're just, they're double deeps packed out. They all have a super on them just for space. So it's like I've got these monstrous colonies other than the two. And, I can combine that in a heartbeat and boom, I'd have 16 strong colonies. But I think it's just me being nervous just because I know what's happened in the past. And when you get too overconfident, that's when mistakes tend to happen. You overlook little minor details, and I don't want that to happen. I don't want a reoccurrence of what happened 3 years ago. So I think that's what kind of gets me at this time of year thinking a little bit too much, just because you're like, well, did I do enough? And, but then on the same hand, it's like, well, there are those beekeepers that don't ever touch them and their colonies are fine. So, but, we'll see. I think I'm in a good spot, but in my mind, I don't, I'm kind of worrying.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Greg, just kind of follow up. I'm in a similar situation. I think mine are pretty well set up, except I'd probably need to put a little food on them. But I need to get them and check. Tim from Be Original Tim said August exhaustion is what it's called, Brian, and that is
yeah,
true. You just get tired, man.
yeah.
And so I really worked hard to get them kind of set up how I wanted them, and I've just kind of let them roll. Plus all the other stuff we've had going on personally, I really have kind of taken a little break from the bees as far as like getting in them and doing much manipulation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that time of year where you can't afford to roll the dice and just say, well, we'll see what happens when I get kind of ready to dig back in there. One thing I want to encourage folks, let me see if I can pull this up here. Let's see if I can pull a Brian. Let's see. There we go.
Wow.
Oh.
Now what happened there?
I'm no good at this. I don't know, Brian. I wanted to show you this. I wanted to show you this photo here. Let's see if I can get back. There we go. All right. Now, what's
awesome.
like? Let's see if I can. Can I make it full screen? No, I don't. I'm not that good. That's all right. Oh, help me, Brian. What am I doing wrong? There it is. One thing that's kind of important this time of year is that you take a little time to just reset just a little bit. I mean, it's been so chaotic the last couple months, the last couple weeks. We've just been all over the country, filming and interviewing and shooting video, future content, future collaborations, product collaborations, and it just wears you out so much. There was a couple moments in the last week that really stand out. That the reason I bring all this up is it's important to be able to take time to detach from these situations, detach from your beekeeping just enough to where you give yourself the mental ability to kind of reframe what it is that you're looking at, what's ahead of you, and what you kind of need to do to execute, make it happen for the rest of this year. Today was a great example where I took old Fritz out and just ran the dog, just get him out there, get him out in the field, and let him do his thing. And he's kind of funny around honeybees. I don't know that you've ever seen a German short hair pointer point at a box of bees, but what I think it might actually be is on the other side of the box. You can see on the very right hand side, you can kind of see this. There's a wax tip propola box, and then a white box, and then a propola box. Once you get further on down where Fritz is pointing, I don't wonder if was a mouse or a groundhog or something kind of ran through there real quick, because he just locked up like he knew what he was doing. And then of course the bees start reminding him of his place and kind of humble him. So he's kind of, taken off and doing his thing. But the reason I bring that up is that did not only my mind, but my heart so much good today, just to get out there and run the dog and just spend a little time with old Fritz, doing that kind of thing. The other thing, let's see if I can.
Greg, you said a word there that I'm curious about.
What's that?
And I know you can't talk about it because you had a hat on the other day and I asked you about it. And then you just said that same word. It's on the side of those boxes.
Let's just say stay tuned on that one.
Yeah.
Thanks for the reminder on that. Let's just say stay tuned. There's a lot of fun stuff about that kind of coming up there.
That's why I went like this and looked, and then I looked over on my big screen. I'm like, huh.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll leave that one there for the time being there. Yeah. I don't want it's not for me to let the cat out of the bag on that one. But
anyways,
let's just say there's some cool stuff going on. Yeah.
It was a great day, Saturday. See what I did there?
Good. Smooth segue right out of there. Yeah. Saturday was the other day that was really good for me. Brian, spending some time with you, just kind of walking around, and we had a great talk. Brian was out with the whole learning yard, and we were actually testing your mics to see how far can we actually get away from the cameras and the mics still pick up. Brian, what did we figure out? Something like 1,150 feet is as far away we could get, and the mics were still picking up.
Bruce,
those mics are something, aren't they?
I was on the back of his truck standing up, and he was driving, and I was waiting for him to either hit the gas or the brake, so I was holding on pretty good. But as long as those things had direct line of sight, we were probably about 1,100 feet away.
Wow!
And those DJI mics were still picking up.
Yeah, they're amazing.
If you saw the intro to the there's so much I want to say, but I don't want to get lost in the weeds yet. Yeah. But when Brian came out, Brian's on the back of the truck, and we're just kind of cruising down to just go check that out. And then it was just, sometimes an idea is just thrown right at you, and you can just feel the tug on your heart, and you just, okay, well. So I went back, grabbed the tripod real quick, grabbed the camera, and we just did a quick video. I mean, it's no frills, no nothing, and just shot the video. But the idea behind the video was purpose. And when those little things start tugging on your heart, I think it's important to chase that thought and see where that goes. If you haven't already checked that out, I'd encourage you to check out the latest video that we've put out called Honeybee Philosophy Purpose. It's a real short video, but boy, just when those ideas and words are kind of laid on your heart, it's awesome to be able to share those things. Yappy the Bee Man's checking in. Good evening, everyone. Greg the Mug Thief. Yappy, if you could only see what I could see, just right over there, just right there. I tell you, Yappy's mug really does a good job. If you want to microwave fish sticks or shrimp flavored ramen noodles for lunch, I mean, I think it does an amazing job. Yappy, nice mug. Does a real good job there. But anyways, that's all I wanted to say for now on that is take time to detach, get your mind right, get the mindset locked in, because it's the time of year where we really do need to make it happen. And if we're going to put one foot in front of the other, sometimes you don't want to take a break and detach. You just want to dig in and dig in and dig in and dig in. And sometimes you start digging in the wrong direction so far you can't dig yourself back out. The season's over, and now you're just waiting to find out how bad it is. So if you take a little time to detach, you can reframe the entire situation, put a good plan together, and then boom, execute. So that's kind of what we've been up to. Is as we're back at the farm here, getting the bees kind of tuned back up for the wintertime, is going through and starting to make those last late season splits and start to requeen. So I thought, you know what, let's go ahead and try to, but let's talk about that a little bit tonight. Bruce, we'll start with you. We'll just keep the order. I know we talked a little bit the last time about late season splits, but if you could break it down, you know, what are some things that you find to be successful components of making later season splits versus earlier season splits?
Well, the ones I've made, I haven't made a lot, but I think I'm going to start to make more. I think strength of the colony is important. Make sure you have plenty of bees, plenty of brood, especially if you're in some sort of a dearth, because, you know, you got to keep it strong enough to help defend what they have. And especially if you're making the splits in the same bee yard, you got to just go back and check on them, make sure there's plenty of bees left in there. But that's one thing I think is strength of the split is important. Number of bees, population. You know, there's certain times of the year, like in the spring, when everything's going good, and the late spring when the flows are kicking in and the bees are all happy, you can just break out real small splits and the bees seem to just plow right through and do well. But when when you're this time of the year, especially, you want them to build up and get strong before wintertime, you need to make sure they're strong splits. And so I haven't made a lot of them, Greg. I have made a few. I just made some back, I think, into July, and they did. I need to get up there and check on them, but they were doing pretty good last time I checked. But the ones that weren't strong just crashed almost immediately. So you got to make sure you got plenty of population in there. Of course, the food and everything is important too. But that's kind of what I would say. Also, I think mated queens is important, and I think it's tough this time of the year to do any type of, unless you, in your operation, Greg, I know you could maybe still graft a little bit if you got plenty of drones, but in like a hobbyist situation or a small side learner situation, if you're just trying to make splits and you don't make your own queens and don't have all that access to your own queens, I think mated queens are probably the way to go this time of year. Those are a couple of recommendations that I would recommend.
Yeah. Would you say when you get to this time of year, it's kind of, risk mitigation mode? You know you could probably get by or get away with doing certain things, but you learn to kind of hold yourself back and say, okay, well, just because I really want to split this thing out and I really want to do this, is this the best use of this asset, and what's going to be the best return on my time investment and the bee investment? And you're not just looking for right now, you're looking for the spring. We're almost to the time of the year where very little of what we do right now is for a this year return on that unit, with the exception of maybe if you're capturing a goldenrod flow or a late fall flow, you're still manipulating and doing things a certain way to be able to capitalize on that. Like you've seen in that photo with Fritz pointing at those beehives. We're in the second flush of goldenrod here in East Central Ohio. And so, as Brian pointed out, typically the first flush of goldenrod, the bees don't do really anything with. That second flush, Brian made a great observation, and you might have seen it in that video where the bees are actually working. That second flush of goldenrod, they had a little bit of pollen on their baskets, but they were primarily with their proboscis digging in and hunting for nectar. So we are just getting into that time frame where the bees are just starting to bring a little bit of that goldenrod flow in. It's not nearly enough because, I've got another video. If I could pull it up, I'll see if I can figure out how to do that and share it here. It's just, this is a real cranky time for bees, especially if you're working bees past 5 p.m. They're just, they're not happy campers to say the least. But you've got to be real careful on kind of what we do, how we go about it, because if we make that split too lean or we're not quite sure where the queen's at, we move boxes and then the wrong direction, left to right, things start to kind of just stack up, and you're left with playing cleanup severely at the end of the year. Brian, what about you? What I know you've done a lot of splits in the spring. You've done some season splits, like in the middle season. You were
Yeah.
talking about late season splits. You've been doing some later season requeening. Now you've got a video coming out here at some point
Mm.
where you'll go into a lot more detail about that. But for now, what is your strategy? How does your strategy change late in the season versus earlier in the year for making those splits and or requeening?
Yep. So there's two main reasons, and this is all purely by, I'll say I've never done this before. So those that are, if you are listening, don't take it that just because I'm talking about it, I am some authority at doing this. This is just what I've done in my little hobbyist apiary. My reasoning is I want to get younger queens in my colonies now so that come springtime, when those colonies get through the winter, I should say if, then they'll have, for this is from what I've been told and what I've, read, they have less of a swarm tendency because they haven't gone through a whole season and they haven't been through that entire season. So I'm looking for young queens that will just lay it up in the spring. And we'll see. I have a couple colonies that I've done this with. I'll see what they do. Everybody will see. I did film, when I got queens and I did a late season split. I do have my little Apame nuke going again. So that's exciting to have that little bugger going.
Yeah.
But that's the reasoning, and next springtime, when I see how those colonies are doing, that will be like probably I'll have to look at how the colonies are sitting, and then I'll have to look at, do a comparison. Okay, my front row I didn't touch, so how do they look as far as their swarm tendencies versus, the ones in the back row that I did? And then I can judge. And if I do see that, those colonies, I didn't have to manipulate them as much to stop them from swarming, then moving forward, I may just go down this road for all of my colonies. I may switch it up when I do get my queens. So, and introducing queens, everybody will see how I introduce my queens, but I just saw a video and I believe he might be, and you know what? I know he in fact is going to be at the expo in January. It's Lawrence from Black Mountain Honey. He's over the pond. I sent this little video clip to Jose actually, and I told him, I said, this is almost what I'm going to do from now on. That way you eliminate the need for having to check for cells. But a viewer of Lawrence's sent him this, I don't know whether it was instructions or something, but he referenced it and he actually did it and it worked exactly like this person had said. But what they did was, when he had a colony that he was going to requeen, he put them in, a queen cage. And it almost looked like, I know over the pond, they have some different style cages. And he put her in one of them, corked it. That way they couldn't let her out. And, they were still feeding her. And he let it go 8 days, I believe it was, so that it was way past, the time frame where that colony could have any chance on making a new queen. And because that the original queen was still in there, they don't make any cups or, start making any cells. And he said, then when you go in, you basically pull her out, install your new one, and you don't have to go through all the frames then and shake them for any cells or cups. And he did it, and he said, I checked it, and it worked flawlessly. Now I'm going to probably play around with that next year. But if that, in theory, if it works, I mean, just think of the amount of time that beekeepers will save, going through, and when you're requeening, just checking for any cells. So, yeah, I'm going to try it next year. I am.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what you come up with on that. One thing that comes to mind that I'd be interested to see how it works for you is if the queens have mandibular pheromones, and they also have tarsal glands that are depositing, and leaving their trace behind as they go. If you cage the queen, anyone who's done that or spent time with queens, she'll start to, they will keep feeding her and tending to her, but she'll get smaller and smaller as she's inside of that cage. But the tarsal glands she's not running around the colony depositing any kind of scent or pheromone. I wonder how that plays into introducing another queen, if it makes it easier, if it hinders it. Long term, it would be an interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe if you to that point, you would just get into just swapping a queen, pull out a queen of the same stature, and then just swap.
His video, like the thumbnail was something like, I've been doing this wrong. And he went through and explained the process, and he said that he's tried it and it worked exactly like what the person that told him how it would work. He said there were no cups, no cells, nothing.
Yeah.
So, if that process does work, man, I wonder what. I've never heard of anyone doing that before. And like I saw DC saying in here, you still have the old queen then also. So
right.
I'm sure you could just bank those old queens, and then if there's any issue there, then you still have those as well, instead of dunking them in alcohol like I did.
Yeah, who knows? I'd be interested to get 10 or 20 or 30 revolutions of that in there and kind of see what kind of
see what it does.
Yeah, maybe a great idea. There might be some nuance you got to figure out for how you're doing there, but
right. Yeah.
Requeening any time of the year, early in the year, I mean, you can do no wrong on that early flow. I mean, you can hardly make an error that you can't quickly kind of fix. But you get into this time of year and you start playing around with new ideas or new ways to do stuff, you could win. But you also, either way, you're going to learn one way or the other that it's for you or it's not.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
So I think there's a lot of things to consider with late season splits and late season requeening that are just kind of biological things with the colonies. You get to the time of the year where the entire colony's overall hive mind is moving towards winter prep and kind of getting everything ready to go, where you get to the time of the year where they're really start to work on raising and nurturing the winter bees. A lot of things, they just get a little more not really cantankerous, but they get more particular with a lot of the movements and things that we do inside of the colony. For instance, like today, I'll see if I can attempt.
We keep talking about winter bees. Does Bruce know what winter bees are?
His winter bees are out in tank tops and flip flops with a scarf for looks.
They do have, it does happen down here, but not like you guys. They're not in hibernation for weeks on end, for sure.
Bruce said
they're
like,
big.
Bruce, you get like 1 week.
Yeah. Well, it's more like a day or two, and then a week of 65 degrees, and then 3 days of, 40, 30 or 40. And then, so it's a little bit difficult because it's just never consistent. I mean, the bees will be out. But one thing is they're always within a couple of days of flying, being able to keep themselves cleansed and everything. But they never really brood all the way back. Yeah.
We joke around and give Bruce a hard way to go, but truth be told, I think Bruce got it harder than we do, because you really got to stay on point. If those bees don't have, in my mind, if they don't have feed, if you're not looking in on them, I would, in my mind, go downhill in a hurry. At least if we get them up to a certain, heck, any more, it doesn't matter, even because we were not cold enough in our part of the country. They're just constantly breaking cluster up and down, up and down, up and down. But if we can we can keep them cool enough, it seems to do pretty good. But queens this time of year, go ahead and I'll get this comment and post it up here. Matt Hunt says, Greg, those queens I got from you earlier this year are awesome. The only bad thing that he can tell the viewers is, I wish you could sell me 5 more Pepto Pink ladies. They're so awesome. Matt, I want to thank you for your support. For everyone who's calling and looking for late season queens, whether you're a part of the Nature's Image farm, or you've just now finding us, this is a really hard time of year for anyone who makes their own queens to have a lot of extras, because we have spent the first part and the entire rest of the year not only getting caught up on queen orders, getting those queen orders out, but now it's a time of year where we have to dig in at the very last minute and make sure that we get our colonies split down, our colonies requeened. And because of that, I hate to say that I've got to be selfish this time of year, but we've done everything we can the entire season to do whatever we can for folks to make sure they have all the nukes they need, all the queens that they need. We kind of put ourselves last. It's the typical, the shoemaker's son goes without shoes kind of a thing. That's the same thing I think with the with the queen breeder or rear, is you end up at the very end of the year kind of getting caught up and getting your yards where you want. That's kind of where we're at right now. But I'm going to try to pull up this photo because I kind of want to, if we can, dive into just a little bit of the how we're going about making some of these late season splits. Let's see if I can pull a Brian the Wizard. Let's see. Stop screen. Share screen. Window. Okay, now you're going to see something in this photo, Brian. I'm going to apologize ahead of time. Okay, this is not an intentional tease. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So what I wanted to show you here is this front pallet. You'll notice you got 3 pretty new boxes here on the left-hand side, and then all the way around the pallet is full. What I kind of wanted to bring up is, I don't know if I can make that. Can I make that any bigger, Brian? I don't know if I can. Let's see.
Upper left, you have the magnifying glasses with the minus and the plus on them.
Oh, what's this button do? Oh, that made it bigger on my screen. I don't think it made it bigger for anybody else. Wait, if you're looking, I guess you can find out how to do the same thing. If you look at that pallet, you'll see 2-gallon bucket feeders specifically on these colonies. But I want to just take you around this pallet here for a minute to kind of explain what in the world's going on here. The first thing that we did is the colony on the far right-hand side, the far bottom right corner colony. That's a deep and a medium, 1.5 stories. You'll notice that the lid is upside down. What we did in that situation is, if you notice, the colony would be upper left-hand corner of that pallet. Kind of behind that propola colony is also another 1.5 stories. What we did is, the colony on the bottom right-hand side it was really getting too big. It was in 2 deeps, 2 mediums, and I really don't like anything that big for wintertime. And so kind of what I did is I dug through, found the box that had the queen and the brood in it, and I moved them from that bottom right-hand corner to that upper left-hand corner. All right, and then the box that in the original configuration that had some pollen, had some open, had some drawn comb in it. They had really burned through a lot of resources. I kind of divided that out equally, and then just put some extra medium frames on that very top super on the bottom right-hand corner. So what I did is I made a split, and I took the majority of the bees, the brood, the queen, and I put that upper left-hand corner of that pallet, and then I put all the food resources back on the bottom right-hand corner. Now, the reason that I did that is I set it up so that when those bees leave the box on the upper left-hand corner of the pallet, they're going to go back and populate the box where they came from, which is the bottom right-hand corner of the pallet. So now they are completely queenless. I may have missed, there may have been some eggs or larvae somewhere in that box, but that's not a big deal. I'll go back in midweek of this coming week, and I'll just dig through and see if they have cells. Once I do see that they have cells, I'll go through, I'll knock them down, and then you can't see, but in this photo on the upper left-hand corner where that row of pines are, is a whole row of box where it's like the very last of, there's maybe a row of 60 queen mating nukes, and we'll just go through and start cleaning out all the queen mating nukes, start pulling all the queens out. Hope to have some that we can send down for Bruce. Everything else is just really going to get put out here in the yard. So what we'll do is I'll come back in 5 to 7 days, and I will just literally put that caged queen inside of this colony on the bottom right-hand corner, and then kind of let them build up. It doesn't end there, because if we wait a week to put that mated queen in there, and then she starts laying within, let's say, 3 to 4 days, like we talked about, when you do the math, we're going to be 21 days from then before we're going to have some emerging brood. So what we'll do is we'll actually go through some other colonies and that are too big, and what I'll do is I'll start digging through and making boxes up that'll go on the back of the truck that are just brood boxes. They're just boxes that are just nothing but sealed brood that might be more than we need, and we'll use that to just kind of balance out and equalize a lot of these colonies. So what we just did is we were able to take a box that was kind of too big for wintertime. We went ahead and split it on the same pallet. It gets the pallet balanced out and equalized. So when we do move that for the wintertime and put it up by a windbreak, the pallet's balanced to equal bees all the way around. When we go to work a pallet, we have 4 units per module. It's a time thing. And so after we did that, we just put a 2-gallon bucket on top of everything else. The next thing that I'll do is in the next week is I will replace all our older style migratory lids. We'll replace those with our new style that's on the majority of our colonies. This is probably these colonies here, and there's another little section of 4-ways. There's maybe 30 or 40 of these in this area. Those are kind of the older lids that we've had out there for quite a while, and we'll get all those flipped out to our wax dip migratory lids that have a patty rim built in, so we can go ahead and put probably an ApiGuard treatment on everything, or at least a pollen patty. The reason why I haven't done anything on these specific colonies is we're going to go through and do a lot of mite washes. Part of our breeding program is to isolate the colonies that are doing well on their own. These haven't been treated yet. So I'm going to go through and get good mite washes on every single one and see who the standouts are. And that'll be a part of the ones that we continue to watch, the ones that if we want to collect drone semen from or make virgin queens off of, then we've got the earmarked colonies that are showing us that they can do a little better with mites. So that's kind of, as we get towards the end of the year, what we just kind of outlined on this pallet is kind of what I will go through and do on every single pallet as I work through these yards, is get them all balanced out. If they're too big, I'll bust them down. And me personally, will always move the queen to the new position and make that split a little heavier, knowing that we're going to lose the field force. They're going to go back to the old location. They'll help repopulate that box, and that seems to work out really well. The only danger with doing that really is when you have a box of bees that are primarily foragers at that point, they're the ones that get to be a little cantankerous, especially when they're queenless. So those are the ones you just kind of have to just know are going to be have a little bit more of an attitude problem. And also they're the ones that are going to time out on bees sooner. So the reason why I brought this long way around of describing this scenario is because this is not without risk. The colony on the bottom right-hand corner is the one that really stands to do the poorest. If I just let it go, if I just put a queen in there, we're just coming up to the first part of September. So we've got about 2 months before the queens really, really put the brakes on. Is that enough time for them to build enough bees for that box? If we keep the feed on, if we keep the pollen patties on, I think so. But I think we're going to have to be smart about that and make sure we're feeding frames of sealed brood. So it was a way that we could make a split. It took a little bit of a risk. It's worked for us in the past. And then what ends up happening is now we've got 2 colonies that are story and a half going into the wintertime, which is our kind of preferred configuration. So all in one swoop, we're making sure we've got feed on. We're doing some balancing. We're making some of the first part of our last season splits. and then we'll go through all of our mating nukes and start getting all the extra queens that are hanging out in small boxes, and we'll start putting those into these splits. And that also is another way to mitigate any kind of a loss of robbing in the small mating nukes. So they're ones that are susceptible to getting robbed out and you losing the queen and all that. So now is the time to start getting all those resources consolidated and move them on to give them kind of that best shot. So that's one way that we go about doing it. The question is from Spirit of Toad, Greg, how do you move these? Easy loader, fifth wheel skid steer, Hummer-Bee? A great question. Actually, neither. What I think my favorite tool right now to move this is a track loader. It's a Kubota 65-2. So it's a skid steer on tracks. For us, it's the best. A Hummer-Bee is, or a Hummer-Bee, or those are going to be way better at just moving pallets or moving equipment or things like that. Where we had to choose a different piece of equipment is we used to use the tractors with front loaders, and we could move these and everything was fine. You can't really see. So as Bruce knows, you kind of have to have a spotter out in front of you so you can see where to stab the pallets and get in and get them up. It's real hard to see when your engine's all the way out front. But it worked. I mean, and we made it work for quite a while. We decided to go with a track loader instead because here on the farm, we need this piece of equipment that we're going to invest that kind of money in is not just for the bees. We're using it on the farm too. So if we're cutting dirt, if we're moving stone, if we're grappling, if we're pulling logs out, we need something that's a little bit more multi-purpose than just a Hummer-Bee. But the issue where we decided not to go something like a Swinger or a Hummer-Bee is lift capacity. So we do a lot with Pro Suite totes. And when a tote is 275 gallons filled at 11.5 pounds per gallon, you get into nearly 3,000 and 3,100 and some pounds of feed on a tote. You're past the capacity of what a lot of the Hummer-Bees, Swingers, and definitely tractors lift on the front loader. So we had to go to a piece of equipment that could safely maneuver 3,500 pounds or so, clear up to maybe 3,500 pounds. So that's a great question. Maybe we should talk about more of that another time, but I can kind of geek out because it's been a whole evolution of not only how we set yards out, the equipment that we use, and how we move them all adapts and changes as we have more opportunities to kind of do that. So that was a good question. Okay, Brian, let's figure out how do I get that out of there? Let's see, stop screen. There we go.
Yeah. Do you want to know what I used to move my feet around?
Armstrong?
Right here. Yep. I just grab the bucket and walk out of the building. And, when I move my colonies, I'm pushing them and yeah.
So I had the full screen up and I guess I forgot there's questions here. There's probably a couple good follow-up questions before we move on, but Nick Zooks asks, do you treat those small mating nukes before you bring them over? I worry about bringing mites over and cat brood and equalizing, and I didn't treat everything at the same time. Kind of yes and no. For me, I don't worry about it a whole lot. The reason being those mating nukes have gotten a workout. I mean, a constant workout. They are constantly going through a queen right and queenless situation. Now, it's not a complete brood break on every single one of those. On the smaller colonies, we're just moving the queen over. The queen gets caged. That caged queen will then get introduced into these other colonies, and then those smaller frames all get consolidated with the queen kind of towards the end. It seems as right now, it's kind of an interesting year. Let me find some wood to knock on it. Okay, I had to knock on wood there. It seems as though one thing that we're not seeing many of at all this year is number one, hive beetles. And the only real difference, the only thing that we've done, I don't even think we've done anything differently. Last year we didn't see a lot of hive beetles either, but being on this ridge, the drier ground, and then I think the constant use of Hive Alive in our feed in combinations with the Hive Alive and the pollen patties, and also the Hive Alive and the fondant, it seems like we're sort of microdosing the colonies nearly year round with thymol. I don't wonder if that has something to do with it too. And then most of those mating nukes, when those are coming from, like, that's a whole. I wish I had time to take the video and get the video out, because there's a lot of things that I think that we do that make a lot of sense as you're growing, and that's including diversifying your configurations going into the wintertime. So coming out of the winter, you've got the right size equipment to do the right size job. So coming out of the wintertime, we'll take all of the colonies that we overwinter in either 5-frame mediums or 8-frame mediums and start breaking all those down into mating boxes. And so those are going through a constant revolution over and over and over and over again, that we will hit them with oxalic acid throughout the year to keep on top while they're kind of smaller. But the larger colonies, there's a lot of different configurations here. But what you just saw in those photos there, those specific colonies are part of our breeding program. And while we do monitor them, I am not trying to get out ahead necessarily and be extremely proactive on mites, because I want them to get to the point to where I have some feedback from them that I can treat the ones that actually need it, but I can also continue to propagate the genetics of the ones that really maybe they don't need treatment, or maybe they can get by with just OA once or twice. Mm-hmm. So I could spend all night talking about that, but that's a great question.
Mm-hmm. I had one thought there. You said you were going to have to go around and replace some lids. That almost sounds like an activity that when there's 15 or 20 people just hanging out around Nature's Image Farm, you could have you could be like, all right, we're going to have some contests here. Here's 5 lids, here's 5 lids, here's 5 lids. Who can get them on the colonies the fastest?
Right. Exactly. I hope to have my ducks in a row way before that. But yeah, we'll have to figure out a few ways to have some fun here on the 16th when we all get together. It'll be a lot of cool stuff. I want to thank Bruce. Bruce, thank you for the super chat. We appreciate you. Appreciate you doing that. I feel like I'm scroll dogging, guys, because as I start to go down one road, there are so many things that I want to talk about that support and take those things even further. But I know we don't have time to get in tonight. If you've got questions specifically on late season splits and queens, maybe put those questions in all caps, and then Brian will see it and star it. But I think we've covered some of the ideas with the late season splits. Bruce, is there anything else that you want to add about the mitigating the risk on making the decision to make those late splits and what that configuration should look like in your neck of the woods?
I don't think so. I just think that I have, like I say, in the past, I've kind of, by this time of the year, I've wanted to be pretty much set for the year. And so I've just started the last year or two really doing a few of those. And usually it's to fix problems as opposed to actually trying to increase. And the truth is, like right now, I'm trying to kind of have better bees, and I'm not really worried about growing. I'm going to use any new queens I get maybe from you. If I order some more queens a little bit later, I'm going to use those to replace, just to try and improve my genetics and but I'm not trying to really get a lot of growth. I'm not trying to do that right now. I'm trying to kind of stay the number I'm at, even drop back a little bit. And so that's kind of where I'm at now. I think it's just, my biggest issue, it always has been the feeding. Probably I'm doing a little better with the mites, doing a little better with the genetics, I think, but it's the feeding. And so my next step is going to be to get out there and see which ones need some food, make sure I've got some food on them. And that's kind of what I'm thinking about doing maybe this weekend, is getting out. I just simply don't keep food on them like you do. I can't seem to get that done. And, but they typically have enough weight to get through. And I kind of in the past have used a similar strategy as Mike Berry, where he just tries to get weight on the hives, get them through the winter. And they usually come out of winter, busting. If honey is your goal, that's not a bad way to go. If your goal is to make bees, then obviously you need to keep the population up. But I got to get in and see which ones need to be fed. I think I've got a couple bee yards that probably do need some food, but I've got 2 or 3 bee yards that are just, I think the weight is good. The bees are looking really super healthy and doing great. So I got to get out there and do that. But as far as the late season splits, queens, don't have a whole lot to add as far as how they should look. I think they just need to be strong. And you need to make sure you got the brood. You got to make sure you have the population in there going into winter, the healthy population to make it through. I do think that we talked about mite control a little bit. I think that's critical going into winter, that your bees aren't sick. And my video I made about when I was putting the treatments in the hives down there in Slocum a couple of weeks ago, the first, I had some really healthy colonies down there. It looked really good. But then one of them that I found the highest mite count in, the bees just didn't look very healthy. There was just a difference about them. Greg, you talk about the vibrancy, the vibrant nature of a hive that's healthy. And then you can just tell a difference. It's hard maybe to see it like on video, but when you open up a colony, you look at the bees, there's just something different about bees that are maybe a little bit sicker. And the one hive there that I did a check on that had like 12 mites in the wash, which was a little bit over threshold. They just didn't look very well. It could have been disease. It could have been viruses. It could have just been that the hive's getting old, the queen's getting old. Maybe they aren't as healthy. It could have been that issue, but it just seemed like the bees were not as vibrant, healthy, and happy as the other ones that I went in and checked. And so it's just you just got to make sure your bees are strong, going into winter and make sure you got plenty of population in there, whether you're making splits or not.
Mm-hmm. Population is what I am hearing you say with that. Population, I think, is one of the hardest things to figure out, not only in the spring, and in the early summer. I mean, we've all heard the cup of bees and a queen cell. That'll take off. You do that this time of year, at least in our neck of the woods, and you are asking for trouble. If you're lucky, the queen will go on a flight and come back, and you'll have a mated queen, but you won't have a population to do anything with the mated queen. What we're seeing, especially today, is we've been doing so much traveling that, like you, Bruce, I am super behind on feeding, and this coming weekend, that's one thing I've got to make the time to get the feed on there, regardless of when the goldenrod flow. I'm not even, as far as the goldenrod flow, great. If it comes, cool. That is the last variety of honey that I want to even consider fooling with to put into a jar. So as far as I'm concerned, I've got no problem mixing feed and goldenrod all at the same time, because I'm leaving it on the colonies for the wintertime anyways. So I'd rather the feed be on there and them have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So population is huge. Also, keeping feed on these colonies and the colonies in the same yard is a big deal. If you put feed on a smaller colony this late in the year and the big colonies are hungry, they will eventually find that colony, and they will do what they need to do with it. So I would highly encourage you to just, if you can, put feed on everybody, unless if it's a colony that you're still tuning up for a fall crop for honey, then obviously don't feed that. But the colonies that you're building up, you're getting them to the size they need for wintertime. That is, in my opinion, is one of the most important things and limiting factors for a colony to make it through the wintertime, is whether or not they have feed on demand, not just stores. I'm talking feed on demand. The reason I say that is we're looking at colonies today where, luckily I didn't get through and I didn't pull the honey off because they were in and burning up something fierce. But what I notice is when there is not a decent flow coming in and there is no feed on the bees, what do you think those queens do?
Shut down.
Yeah, exactly. They start slowing way, way down. Now, if I was on point, starting 4 weeks ago, I would have had my bucket feeders already on top of these colonies and just trickle feeding, right? But I didn't. And now I'm looking at, I'm paying the price, because how many frames of brood have I lost per colony over the last 4 weeks because there wasn't enough feed trickling in. So even though we try to do everything perfect and try to get these bees tuned for max performance, we just flat ran out of time this year, and I couldn't get feed on everything the way that I wanted to. But I'm to the point where I absolutely have got to make that a priority this weekend, is to get my bucket feeders out on everything. And then this year I'll double down on mostly 2-gallon buckets on everything to help buy a little bit more time, so they can just keep trickling. Where that's really important is also those splits too. Those splits where you've got those new queens that you're introducing, you want to make sure that vibrancy and that essence inside the colony where they feel like something is coming in, so mama can just turn it on and let it rip. You can totally make a split with a mated queen right now, and if there is no flow out there and there's no feed on the colonies, even if they have stored feed, it's my opinion that they will only do so much. She will only lay so strong, and that's just something you have to consider. I think when you're making late season splits, is if the more you can do to stimulate feed or a flow coming in, I think the better that those queens do, and I think that's a big deal. So kind of keep that in mind. I'm sure we'll get into a little bit queen techniques and things for this year. Dustin P, thanks for that super chat. We appreciate you. Thanks for everyone for tuning in and supporting the Bruce's Bees YouTube channel, the Castle Hives YouTube channel, and the Nature's Image Farm YouTube channel. Whether you're tuning in live tonight for the Stream Team Beekeeping Chat, you're listening later on the replay, or you're checking out in the podcast feed, we want to take a minute just to say thanks. Fellas, before we get on and talk about queens and answer some questions, is there anything else that you're doing in your bee yards to kind of set yourselves up to be successful with those splits or those late season queens? Bruce, I think you're pretty much wrapped up for the year and you're just letting them do their thing. Is that about where you're at?
I think so. I'm just kind of going to see what happens. And then if I can get just a few more queens, we've talked about a little bit, I'm going to try and introduce those for genetics for next year. But with what I have here, the only thing I may do is if the bees have pulled in a few supers of cotton honey, if it's enough to be worth pulling, I may try pulling some of that. But as far as like manipulation of frames, honey super removal, manipulation of boxes, we'll do some spot checking, maybe reduce some size on a few here or there, or, but I'm going to remove the honey supers one way or another, probably, from some of these hives. They got like a deep and a medium or a medium, a deep and a medium. And so I'll probably pull some of those off. They don't need to be that big, but, that's my only thing left to do as far as a real task ahead. Besides, and I've got to remove the mite treatments. I've got Apivar in a lot of the colonies, the ones that don't have the possible honey supers on them. And then just spot check, condense, try and fill slots, try and get stuff moved around a little bit, maybe get the bee yards more uniform as far as bees on all the pallets, and just kind of move a few things around here or there. But I am pretty much, I think, ready as far as like with numbers and what I want to do for the winter, except for maybe a few more late season splits or queen replacements here in about a month or so. I think I'm pretty much where I want to be for winter now. I just got to really kind of hone in on the feeding and start working on that. We typically have a pretty good fall flow here. It's kind of hit or miss, obviously, but it's been, we had a lot of rain, a pretty good amount of rain throughout the summer for the most part. But the last 2 or 3 weeks, it just got so hot and so dry. It hadn't rained in several days. And so I don't know if that'll affect the fall flow, the goldenrod and aster and things like that. I don't know if it'll affect it or not. I'm not sure what's going to happen with that. And so we'll find out here soon. I think it's going to start blooming. Lisa said she's seen a few goldenrod buds and blooms up in her yard up there in Ozark, which is a few miles north of here, right by some of my bees up there. And I haven't really seen any goldenrod yet, but it's the time of the year down here. I think it's kind of weird because you guys are having some goldenrod up there now. It's like it works its way from the north down. In the spring, everything starts here. It's kind of weird. The spring, everything starts here earlier, and then it works its way up. And then in the fall, everything is the opposite. It starts up there earlier and works its way down, it seems like. Yeah. And one thing, just thinking about that, and I don't know, Greg or Brian, if you agree with this or if you've noticed this, but I heard somewhere way back when I was a new beekeeper that about every 100 miles, it's about a week's difference as far as the blooming. Of course, that's not exact, but just as a general rule, and if you think about that, it's kind of true. Down here, say late January, February, where you guys are, probably about 5 or 6 weeks later, when you look at that. So it's kind of interesting to think about some of those things.
If you're listening tonight and you're from the state of Ohio and you have seen the first flush, at least the first flush of goldenrod in your neck of the woods, leave us a comment down here and just put in goldenrod. I'm curious to see Ohio, and then we'll branch out. I'm curious to see, we watch the hummingbirds coming up to see, when are we going to start seeing swarms? When does the bee season really start to kick off? Goldenrod really starts to play a huge part in what the season is doing as far as creeping towards fall time. So if you're in the state of Ohio and you've seen goldenrod in your neck of the woods, leave us a comment here and just say goldenrod. So Brian, what about you? Is there anything before we move on, talk a little bit about queens and answer questions? What do you feel like you need to be doing to make sure that you continue to head in the direction that you, and I don't, spoiler alert, you're going to have a really neat video coming out with sharing a little bit more about your requeening process this year. So I don't want you don't have to give it all away yet, because I know you're processing all of that still.
Yeah.
But what do you need to be doing to make sure that you're giving it the best going into the wintertime?
Right now, so typically what I do is, for this time of the year, I've wrapped up my OA treatments, to keep my mites in check. I like that done going into September. That way my colonies are clean so that they can hit this last flow. Typically then what I do is, and it's all dependent on Mother Nature and how the flow is. But when the flow starts to taper off and I yank my supers, I want weight on my colonies. And I think that's everybody up here, and even down south, you want weight on your colonies. So just a general rule of thumb that I always have also, I never pull any honey out of my deeps. So that's first and foremost. I want them to have those stores for the winter. So that's it. I mean, in my next few weeks here, it's going to be, get my supers on and then get them off. And literally as soon as they come off, I'm going to be dropping strips, and then I'm going to be putting feed on. That way they can all just hit that weight. Now, the split that I just did, I just started up that 7-frame Apame again. I set that thing up. I don't think most splits look like that of what I set up, just because I put 3 frames of good brood in there, and then they've got 3 good frames of stores, and I left them with 1 frame that they could tinker with. So I pretty much packed that split out. I actually had a hard time fitting all 7 frames into that joker because they were so fat. So, that in itself, I probably am going to throw little chunks of patties on that, just because I want to make sure that colony, gets an adequate population. That way it can get through the winter. But yeah, this is just, it's such a tricky time of the year right now. If anybody's like brand new and you're worried, if you're out and you're checking your colonies and they don't have weight, get feed on them. I would not look at harvesting a fall flow if your colonies don't have weight, because if you rob that honey this time of the year, and especially here, and your colonies are exceptionally light, you're going to end up not having colonies in February, March up here. So it's just so important to make sure that they do have that weight. And that's been my routine the last few years. It's worked really well. And when I drop those strips, that's 42 days. So figure that covers last bit of September, October, and beginning of November. And if I have to do another OA treatment, I can. And I probably this year, Greg, I'm going to do exactly what I did last year. And that's when we hit Thanksgiving. you know what all of my colonies are going to get.
Some Hive Alive fondant.
Yep.
Yep.
And what I found last year is those jokers, you know, I've got that. See, Bruce, you're rubbing off on me. I'm saying jokers now.
Jokers is the new favorite word.
Those jokers were nailing that fondant. And I think they had, by the time we got to the new year, they had almost cleaned out an entire fondant, you know, patty or cake, whatever you want to call it. And I was having to put in January a second, you know, cake of fondant on them. And it's almost like they were looking up and they saw that they had the ice cream parlor above them, you know, and it's like, well, we want that ice cream versus, you know, what they had stored. And I'm fine with that, just because if they're taking that fondant, they have all of the benefits of Hive Alive in it, you know, and they're saving their stores for, you know, the extended winter that we have. So that's going to be my fall. I think every year I'm just going to continue doing that.
Can you believe we're sitting here talking about
Oh God,
flirting with putting? I mean, we're already talking about
it's ridiculous.
fondant.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's so much to say about that. We'll for all the folks who, if you're buying your Hive Alive products, your liquid, your pollen patties, or your fondant with us at Nature's Image Farm, I want to say thanks. We appreciate you. We'll start having fondant. A little early to be ordering fondant now, but we will have fondant available in probably the first part of October. Any sooner than that, it's you know, it's not really necessary.
Yeah.
The end of November is the time to put it on. Truth be told, they really don't start working that, at least in our neck of the woods, until maybe Christmas, but it depends on what the weather does. One interesting point that you were talking about, you know what I've never found in a Hive Alive packet of fondant?
What?
Hive beetles.
That's true.
That would be like the place for those jokers to be hiding. And I've never actually found them. I've never found them up in there. I'm really starting to think that the thymol is playing such a huge role that I'm just starting to, each year I keep getting little reminders. Hey, what's going on with this thing? But anyways, so if you're looking for Hive Alive fondant, pollen patties, or the liquid additive, if you want to mix your own feed, definitely keep us in mind here at Nature's Image Farm. You can go to our website at naturesimagefarm.com. You can shoot me a message. We can talk. We can get you. If you don't see it on the website, doesn't mean we don't have it. We can also get it to you. You can come pick it up, or we can ship it special too. So there's going to be a lot of fun things that you're going to see on our website that will be available to ship that we haven't had in the past. So that's going to be pretty cool. Guys, we were talking about queens a little bit. Oh, there's Brian. All right, Brian, chug. Do it.
That would probably clear up what I have here.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm already ready.
Yeah. Nice. Well, the one thing's for sure is you won't have any roundworms, will you?
Exactly.
Well, queens is the next thing I want to talk about. I know we're already getting kind of late here, but I want to be real clear too, fellas. When we talk about making late season splits, let me see if I can pull. Can I pull up that picture again? Let's see if I can do it. Brian, share screen. Do that.
He's shaking it up to drink some. He's going to do it.
Chug a lug. When I'm making these splits here, I am literally making single box splits. I'm not using 2 and 3 frames of splits or of bees to make splits. I'm using the entire 10 frame box, and I will break that box out where I have some brood in the center, some either drawn comb or fresh frames right outside of that brood, and then some food frames on the outside of those boxes. That's what we're doing. We're not making little tiny baby splits. We're making splits big enough to where if something goes wrong, there's still enough bees in the box to do something with. And so we're making them strong enough to where they can almost stand alone. But we're making them strong enough that we can throw a bucket feeder or a pollen patty on them, and they will still continue to cruise until we get something figured out. So for me, that's really important because in the past, I was guilty is once I learned how to make splits, I was a joker, man. I'm telling you, if it looked like I could pull a split off it, do it. Get me a bottom board, get me a lid, find me a box. We're throwing those jokers in there. See, look where Brian. We're just Bruce rub. Next thing you know, we're going to be wearing those Atlanta Braves hats too. I mean, what's this world coming to?
No. That's not going to happen. From now on, it's going to be. Here we go. Hashtag jokers.
There it is.
I haven't. I don't think I've said the word tonight yet. You guys are the ones using it.
Before I get on a rant here, let's finish up the goldenrod. We've got, let's see, where'd it go? Markman 5109 goldenrod is coming in strong up in Wisconsin. Awesome. So that'd probably be the first flush. Now we just drove through, let's see, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, clear up in Minnesota. I didn't see any goldenrod in South Dakota yet, but I saw goldenrod in Minnesota, the very first. And so that was about 2 weeks behind us. So I'm thinking up there in Wisconsin, probably the first flush. So it's starting to come. So we've got Jeremy Lindsay at Lindsay Homestead Farm here in Dandridge, Tennessee. Goldenrod has started to come alive along with yellow wingstem. All right, that's good. Oh, Joy Walkinspaw here in Fairfield County, goldenrod. M&J Habitat, Newark, Ohio, goldenrod. Our buddy Randy Reed at Trails End Farms, he's got goldenrod going on. Let's see. Dan Weaver, he's almost Wheeling. He's got goldenrod. Megan Durr, she's here in Ohio too, not far from me. She's in Dresden. She's got goldenrod. Spirit of Toad, no goldenrod yet. Doug Mullahan, Northeast Ohio, has got goldenrod, and Brian doesn't. What is going on, Brian?
It's ridiculous.
John Lawler's got goldenrod, early goldenrod.
I would love to walk out into my apiary and have it smell exactly like just a huge vat of dirty socks.
Look, I'm just going to say it. I don't think it's necessarily the goldenrod that has that smell. I think it's the combination of goldenrod and aster. I could be wrong, but it really kicks into high gear when we start to see the asters popping up. Tony West Bees has goldenrod, the early variety, down in Adams County, southern Ohio. And Tom Wayner at Mac Apiary B, southwest Ohio, early goldenrod, ironweed, jewelweed, white flowers that he forgets the name.
Hey, Bruce Brown at 917 had a question here.
Okay, Brian, you want to pop some questions up? Well, don't forget about Queens. We got Queens and then questions.
Go ahead. I know.
Go ahead.
And you're gonna laugh. You're gonna laugh because you've set yourself up for this.
Okay, pop up Bruce's question. What is propola?
And hang on, I took care of it for you.
Bruce Brown, have to stay tuned for future updates. Yep. Wow. There's going to be you're going to hear so much about it in the very near future. So definitely stay tuned. I hate to be so vague, but it's going to be pretty cool. So quickly, let's talk about Queens, and then we'll finish up with questions. Right now, today, what I did in one of my favorite configurations of a colony ever is our lighthouse horizontal bees that we designed and had horizontal bees make for us. You talk about putting something through the ringer. I can't even begin to tell you how many nukes that we've pulled out of that, how many queens we pulled out of that, and how many queen cells that we pulled out of it using it as a cell starter. Talk about an unbelievable configuration for a piece of equipment. What I did today is I've intentionally kept them queenless, and they are not happy. I mean, absolutely. Well, look, let's see. Yeah, not happy at all. I've got a video. It's crazy.
Oh man.
So today what I did is I made a cell starter, and I'm going through all the colonies that are intentionally queenless, and I'm using them as the last of the cell starters. Now, ideally, would be using a colony that had nurse bees, and I would make them, or at least the think that they're queenless to finish out. But I've got some colonies here that I'm going to run as self-starters, and then as I finish up, I'll just leave one behind for them. The reason I'm doing that this late in the year is we still have drones that are being capped, believe it or not. We are really focused on having a lot of green frames and drone frames throughout, especially the colonies that are part of the breeding program. And so what we're doing is grafting. We're still doing our last rounds of grafts for these self-starters, but these particular queens have a different purpose. These are not queens that we are necessarily utilizing in an open mated situation. These are virgin queens that we are specifically using to artificially inseminate. And so at the very end of this year that's where we're really focusing a lot of our efforts, is just working on those chops. And so right now, all the queens that we're making this coming week, matter of fact, they might even be emerging right around the 16th or so. If I think about the time frame, there might be, so we might have some queens that are hatching out in the old incubator, and this is the last year for that incubator. Holy cow, that's a story for a different day. But so we are making queens, but we're not using those or relying on those queens for an open mated situation. Now we still probably could, if I grafted today, and I've got a queen emerging 16 days from now, and then she's mated within, let's say, 7 to 10 days, we get into a 4-week time period that puts us into the 1st of October. If we had a beautiful queen coming out and she's laying up a storm, and then she's going into the 2nd week of October and she's mature, you could use those for backup queens to requeen any of those late season boxes that just needed the queen. Especially, and the reason I brought it up is one thing that I personally have to be very careful with this time of year, and I've learned this the hard way, is if we weren't on top of mites earlier in the year and we're trying to use right now as the opportunity to get cleaned up on mites, you may put yourself in a position where you are probably good to go on mites, but a lot of the treatments that we're going to put on there are either going to slam the brakes on those queens, and she's going to stop laying the duration of that product. We're talking about Apogard, that could be up to 20 days. We're talking about Formic, could be up to 14 days. I don't have any experience with Apovar, but Brian, you said it's a 42-day. I don't know that Apovar affects the queen laying a whole lot, but the other two certainly do. OA, of course, really doesn't, but that's a different treatment for a different set of circumstances. So if you're using Apogard, if you're using Formic to knock out mites, if you're using the products that fall within what Dr. Robin Underwood outlines as the organic treatment management program, then you got to keep in mind when to put those treatments on. It's tricky. If you're just now putting them on, you stand the chance on the queen slowing down or halting laying for a little while at the time of year where you really need her to be starting to lay up the winter bees. And so you've got to make sure those colonies are big enough to buffer that little bit of a drop and that little bit of a loss. If you're getting into half of a box of bees, like 4 or 5 frames of bees in a 10-frame box, and you go to put a treatment on, not only is the box not big enough for Formic, but you put Apogard on something like that, you might be looking at a surprise with 3 or 4 frames of bees in 20 days and very little brood. So keep in mind, if you are making late season queens, if you are building up your bees, be mindful of the treatments that you're using, that you don't put something on there that's going to slow down the brood if you are really needing them to brood up. Hopefully next year you won't put yourself in the position where you need the queen to be brooding up still this late in the year, unless those bees are clean. And I hope that makes sense. But I could spend 2 hours getting lost in the weeds on that, because that's one of those ask me how I know kind of a things. Bruce, have you ever had any issues with later season treatments that really halted the queens and put the colony in a kind of a bind as far as numbers go going into wintertime?
Not really. Possibly just a little bit last year because I used Apogard into September, October, sometime in that time frame. But they seem to plow through and do okay. Some of my colonies may have been a little weaker after that, but it didn't seem to have a major effect in a negative way on them. But I've just usually used Apivar, Apivar Amitraz type treatments or OAV, and neither one of those, the bees don't even skip a beat with either of those treatments. You can't even tell it's been in there really. So, anyway, yeah, I have never had, except for last year, I tried Apigard and I know it slowed them down, but it didn't seem to really cause the colonies to crash that I could tell.
Right. Brian, what about you? Have you seen Apivar slow down egg laying at all?
I have never noticed that. And let me, oh gosh, let me see if I can share. No, that's not it. Gosh, I'll have to find the, here. Let me see if I can't find the picture. Pictures. Let me see here. There we go. Present, share screen. There we go. That's a colony that had Apivar on it.
Looks great.
So
yeah, that looks pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I've never had any like ill effects from using Apivar. So,
Brian, talk to us a little bit about your late season treating regimen, what that kind of looks like, what colonies are too small, what's too big, and how that sets you up for the wintertime.
Yeah. So I normally always run double deeps. Now, last year and this year, there's been an exception in that I've had that Apame 7-frame nuke going. So my treatment regimen usually, I just had a squirrel moment, spirited toad. What kind of dog is that? It's a micro mini sheepadoodle. But my treatment regimen, usually what I do is August is my OA month. I do 6 treatments, every couple days. I'm doing a treatment for 6 total. And then I get my supers on. And then after that, I drop my Apivar strips. Those stay on for 6 weeks. So you're covering, typically it's like the last week of September or so. It just varies. Might be the 3rd week of September, might be last week. And then it covers all of October into maybe like the 1st week of November. And then when I yank the strips, I'll do some washes. And if they need some OA at that point, it's not cold enough up here, so I can hit them. If they need a little bit more OA, then I'll hit them. There's only been a handful of times in the last 2 years where my counts late in the season have been high, where I've gone away from using like Apivar and I've used Formic on them. Like if I needed to really get a knockdown, I'll go to Formic just because, you get such a heck of a knockdown using Formic versus Apivar. But it really depends. I guess first and foremost, you got to know where your mite levels are, and if your mite counts are not that high, you can use Apivar because it's a very, it's not one of your, hard treatments on the colonies. I haven't ever had it shut the queens down. That's why I showed that picture. I had popped the lid, and that's when I was taking the strips out. I looked at that and I'm like, geez, oh man, this colony is just packed. So didn't shut those down. But it's just more or less knowing where your counts are, and that will dictate what treatment you do. But my standard treatment, it's yank supers, drop in strips. If they need a round or 2 of OA, then you can. And then I'm becoming a fan of the, solstice around, late December or so, and I hit them with a round of OA just to get those phoretic ones, just because here, in Northeast Ohio, we're not like, if you go down to Alabama, where they still have they'll still have a lot of brood. Now, not as much, but they never um, really stop with the brood. We only have a little bit. There's times where you look in there and there's just such a small patch. That's a perfect time of the year. And I didn't learn that until I think it's probably been within the last 2 or so years. That's a perfect time of the year to hit them with the OA. That way you zap those phoretic mites, So that's typically what I do. I mean, I teeter totter back and forth between those strips and OA. And if it's needed, then, I'm visiting not apiaries with Formic Pro. So,
Yep. I think we'll probably, I think we've talked a lot this year about the importance of doing washes. I think we've
yeah,
talked a lot about the treatments,
yeah,
the pros and the cons, when things may or may not be the best choice for you. And I know if folks are getting tired of hearing about that, it's an important thing that eventually a lot of us have come to not only appreciate but understand that
mhm,
if we don't get on top of that, it's too hard to play catch up, and then the bees end up
yeah,
suffering, and we end up with a result come March that's just not
yeah.
ideal if you need bees to make bees or to make honey. So yeah, so those are
Yeah.
great thoughts, Brian.
And I mean, I can even think of, in the U of F program, the Master Beekeeper program, they just preach know your mite counts, because that'll dictate the direction that you go.
Yeah,
You wash a colony and you're below threshold, you know, in my mind, does it hurt to give them an OA treatment? You zap the phoretic, versus if you wash a colony and you're washing, gosh, what was that one that we washed last year in the learning yard? Wasn't it 20s or whatever the heck? You wash a colony that's got this astronomical mite drop, you know, I mean, you have to act differently.
right.
You can't drop strips in a colony like that. It's just not your mites are just. I mean, they're going
It's
to run
huge. You
like
get those high numbers. It's kind of already too late.
yeah,
There's a
yeah,
let's go ahead and start to get to some questions here. We're an hour and a half in, and I think a lot of the things we want to keep saying are probably in question form. But Flower Street Farm Bees makes a great point that sometimes temps force you to wait to use treatments at this time of year, or the temperatures force you into a position or a corner on which treatment product might be most um, agreeable for those conditions. Apogard, he says, will definitely stop egg laying for a couple of days. We've definitely seen that too. So rather than waiting until fall time to do those treats, we try to find the pocket in the window where it's late summer, going into early fall, where we can get in there and do what we need to do. And I think the determining factor for us on that was not even caring about goldenrod. Like, let's not even put ourselves in a position where we need to capture goldenrod. Once you take that off the table, it's like, oh, okay, cool. Well, boom. Now we can go ahead and do what we have to do. And then you can pair the appropriate treatment with whether or not you need to feed. So there's so many nuance, and everything gets so complicated so quick. It's not just we have these bugs in a box and let's grow them up and let's all treat them the same and feed them the same and have the same result. It's just there are so many different variables there. So Brian, you want to let me see if I know how to do that. Let's go through here. And we've got a lot of great questions tonight. So I'm going to thank
yeah,
everybody for tuning in here. These chats, I feel like there's so much to say every week that we could spend 6 hours. But let's get into. There was a question that pertained to what we just talked about. I had seen it in there. I'm not sure where it was at, but it was about thresholds. So before we
Mm.
jump to Marty Guy's question,
It was
Bruce,
from
what is?
Marty also.
It was from Marty. Okay. Bruce, what is your threshold, your personal threshold in Dothan, Alabama, that you will find in a wash before you decide to put a treatment on?
Well, I think they say 3% is what I've always heard, but I just don't like to see mites in there. If it's more than, really 3 or 4 mites in a wash, which would be what, 1.5 to 2%, I usually I mean, not even that much. I just like to treat them if I see a significant number of mites. Threshold, 3%. If you figure 3 mites per 100 bees, theoretically that would be a 3% threshold if you got 9 mites in a wash. But that just seems like a lot to me, and so I try to keep it lower than that. I just feel like, especially when the bees are building, that if you start off in the spring with a mite wash of 4, by the time August rolls around, even though that's like a 1 point whatever percent, by the time August rolls around, it may be fine right then, but by the time August rolls around, you're going to be at, who knows, 15, 20, 30, who knows. So I just like to try to keep them knocked back. It's almost like I feel like the post-treatment wash is as important or more important than the pre-treatment wash, because then you can see where you're really at the end.
Right.
And so I went through, and if you watch my video about the treatments of the mites and the beetles, really my bees are pretty clean. I did have that one wash, I think, with 12 in it, but the rest were like 1, 2, just 3. They just didn't have a lot of mites in there, but I went ahead and treated them, pretty much all, unless I was, like I say, honey supers on or whatever. I mainly checked just a couple of those bee yards, and really my numbers were pretty good by most people's standards. But to answer your question, I personally like to see it probably 2% or lower, even though I know that a lot of people say 3% is the threshold. I just like to see them way down there. I don't like to see mites in my bees. And I think, with the treatments I've done, it seems like my bees, I can get them down to that, 1% or below threshold. If I try to take care of them, stay on top of it, it seems like I'm able to do that pretty well on most of my colonies. There's always a few outliers for some reason that seem to have a pretty high load, but overall, the vast majority seem to stay well within even my threshold.
Brian, what about you? Do you have a threshold?
Man, it's like I've never done this before. I'm trying not to cough into the mic, so it's 2% for me. And when I had one wash this year a little higher, but I've treated and things were kind of remedied. But I know when the inspector guy was over, he was actually surprised because I had one colony wash 6, but then the others were like, I think I had one at 5, and then I had some 3s. I had a 1. I had a couple 0s. So I like them low. I'm kind of like Bruce. I just, when you're getting them 6 and above, that's where you tend to get a little nervous, because it's more nerves because you got to veer away from your standard course and you have to adapt to, a new treatment. So, if I were to find one, I think when I get close to double digits, so if I'm breaking close to 10 this time of the year, I would use Formic, but just got to watch with Formic. So follow the label very closely.
Yeah, exactly. I'm with I'm at 2% for the most part. It gets a little different here because the colonies that are earmarked and designated for our breeding program, I need to see what those colonies are doing, right? And so if I get colonies that start getting past 3 and 4%, it doesn't matter. Those ones are getting treated. But the ones that are cruising, the ones that are maintaining, and they're going 0, 1, 2, 1.5, 2, 1.5, 2, 1. They're going back and forth, and they're staying within that 1 to 2 margin on their own. Those are ones that I absolutely do not treat, and I want to make sure that I'm monitoring them and see kind of what they do. And we have some every year that would just kind of stay right in that sweet spot, and they kind of do their thing. And this year we made a lot of queens, and specifically made colonies for drone colonies for that. So it gets to be a little bit we have a tendency of just overcomplicating everything when you start to get into and start making queens and work on the genetic side. But I think it's an important thing to be able to do, is to be constantly tuning up our genetics every single year for all the attributes that we want to see past to the next year and the next rounds of queens. That's sort of a big deal. So 2% is definitely the threshold for us. When I'm getting into 2%, however, I'm going to personally Apogard or Formic Pro for what we're using here. Anything less than 2%, I've got no problem hitting them with oxalic acid. And where this gets to be tricky is if you are raising bees to sell as nukes, you can't play you can't be wishy-washy. You've got to make sure that the colonies that you're pulling the nukes from were clean to start with, that the nukes that you've pulled stay clean, because you've got to have clean colonies going to customers' apiaries. The idea is that eventually you get a genetic stock built to where maybe they stay within that 1 to 2%. That's the idea. But we got to make sure that we have clean bees to use as the bulk bees to start with, or we don't have the stock to be able to use and do the things with. So was a really good question. Let's go ahead and let it rip. We've got about let's give it about 10-15 minutes for questions, and we're gonna turn off for the night there. So Ricky Rorick over at Horizontal Bees asks, when you're breaking hives apart and see a lot of mites in the drone brood, would you treat? Brian says yes. Bruce?
That's definitely a cause for concern. You might want to investigate further, but that usually indicates there's a problem. If you see one, maybe two, it's not a big deal. I don't think too much, but if you start just breaking them up and just seeing it riddled with mites, you've got a significant problem, I would say. So it depends kind of on the time of the year, what your goals are, what you're trying to do. At least I think maybe just hammer them with some oxalic acid a few times to knock the ferritic mites off. But yeah, you got to get that under control. Even if you have to, I think you need to treat and figure out a solution pretty quickly, because, it seems to me like I don't see a lot of them. Of course, my mite loads are usually pretty low, but I don't see very many mites in the drone brood. But boy, sometimes you get in a hive that's infested and it's just like, they're just riddled with it. And if that's the case, you're probably going to be in trouble if you're not careful.
Yeah, I think my mind goes to, if Ricky says breaking apart, still my brain goes to, oh, we're breaking apart to make splits. Is that what you're doing? And then your brain goes a bunch of different ways. Okay, well, if you're doing that, if you start, pulling, if you're cracking boxes and you've got drone brood stuck to the bottom, and you start to notice that when the cappings are tore off the drones, that you're seeing that those drones have little red tick friends stuck to them. Yeah, I think that's put the colony back and you put something heavy on, like Formic. Because if you were to go in there and you were to do a drone pull and pull 10 drones from those cap cells, and you find one, okay, it's not the end of the world, not to be alarmed. But if you find 3 or 4, 5, 6, hey, you've got problems. I think there's going to be some interesting information about. We've heard a lot about drones being kind of the breeding ground for the mites, and the mites prefer the drones and not so much the nurse bees. But I think a lot of the theories on that are being challenged greatly, and I think there's going to be a lot of contradictive information coming out about that in the future. So definitely stay tuned for that. But Ricky, if I was just doing inspections or just seeing what was what, I'd put that rascal back, and I would probably have to lay the Formic to him. Temperatures were right. And then if you do lose a queen in a situation where you start to see that many mites, losing a queen is not the biggest threat. The biggest threat is having that entire colony pretend and flirt as though it's going to go through the wintertime and then crash, and then have a mouse move in, or have them get robbed out or slimed out or everything else, and then lose all of the assets, which are the frames, the drone comb, the pollen, the food stores, the brood, lose all that because the hive crashed. So that's just my 2 cents. I would nuke them. That's what I would do. A question from Megan Durst. Hey, Megan. She asks, how about determining when hives need combined instead of splitting? Great question. Bruce, what do you think? When would you combine rather than split?
This time of the year, it really just depends on the strength of the bees. If you have a weaker colony, if you have a couple weeks, you need to probably combine them with something. If they don't have much brood, if the queen is beginning to fail, You probably need to combine them. And this time of the year, if the colony is really strong and you don't necessarily want to split, I think it's okay to leave them strong this time of the year. Odds are they're not going to swarm. But if you want to split this late in the year, like we've talked about earlier in the chat tonight, if you have the mated queen and you set things up properly, really packed out colony, you can go ahead and split that colony and do that. But it's just, in the spring, obviously splitting can help prevent swarming, help increase your numbers. It can increase your numbers too, but the later in the year you get, the more of a risk there is when you're doing that. And so that's what I think. This time of the year combining is something that I haven't done a lot of it in the past. I should do more of it, but it is a really good tool to help strengthen and reinforce colonies going into the winter. Mm-hmm. Splitting can be a little more tricky, I think.
Mm-hmm. Brian, what do you think? When do you combine instead of split?
So I probably will end up combining. There's 2 colonies that they're not quite positioned where I would like them at. Now I'm going to let this next fall flow kind of dictate my decision. But if I'm looking at colonies that, they've basically had all summer long and, they haven't quite filled out like they should have. I mean, there's other issues there at hand, and those colonies have been, the queens were replaced. So I'm going to give them a couple weeks to see if they can't rebound back. But if they're still not situated where I would like them at, that's where you can combine to set up a strong colony going into the winter time versus having these 2 small ones. It just, for me in my area, I would rather, instead of fighting with 2 smaller colonies, I'd rather make 1 large one. That's just me, though.
You could always split them back out in the spring.
Yep.
You can always, if you want those 2 colonies, you can always split them back out.
And that's it. And this is just me, like I'm a person that I always like to go double deeps. So if you have this colony that's just busting at the seams, then in the springtime, you're going to end up where you had 2 colonies that you made into 1. If we have Greg Burns along with us and you open up these colonies in the springtime and you're looking at all these cells, you can make X number of splits off of those colonies. Yep. So like what Greg always says, stop worrying about grafting and different things like that. Let the bees do the job, let them put the work in. And it makes sense because in the springtime, when you have those packed out colonies, I mean, you're just making basically split as far as what you want to grow. So that's always what I like to do, and I like to equalize my colonies, because then if I combine them and I have, let's say I have 2, 3, or 4 or 5 frames extra that aren't going to fit into, that footprint where I'm combining to, I can always look at other colonies in my apiary as well and say, hey, maybe that one over there has a frame that's not quite filled out. Well, let's put one of these over there. So it gives you the opportunity. Not only do you create this larger colony, but then you can also take any additional frames out of that and equalize throughout your apiary as well. So it's usually what I do, and tends to work.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to that other than you may have heard the old scripture where it's better to dwell on the rooftop than inside with a scornful woman. I have learned over the years to be way more conservative with my approach to the end of the year, because the last thing in the world I want to do is to have that walk of shame in March from the bee yard to the house and say, well, we just lost all the bees, or we just lost all these bees, or we just lost X% because, well, if you remember, these are the ones that da-da-da-da-da. One thing I want to be really clear about, making late season splits. These are downsizing splits. For me, they are downsizing splits. They are when we are taking these colonies that are a little bit bigger, like this. We're taking colonies that are in triple deeps that are, I don't like that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to overwinter in that size. For me, what I'm doing is I'm busting those rascals down, I'll maybe make the split. I'll move the queen part of the colony to a new location that is maybe like a story and a half or so, just enough to where I know what I leave them with after the foragers leave, they will be strong enough to make it to the winter. Let all those other bees fly back to the original spot. Now you've got another box or two full of bees that now need a mated queen. That's when I would do those downsizing splits. And it's only because I don't like triples. I hardly like doubles. Triples for me, it's too much. I like story and a halves. I like doubles. Anything that I know is on the pace, is tracking out to be bigger than that for wintertime. I will go ahead and do that now while they still have time to brood up, while they still have time to forage and gather and collect, while I still have time to treat if I needed. So this is the time for me to start to do that. Now, if I get all the way until October, even the first part of November, I can totally still do this, but it's very, very meticulous. I would rather do it now and give it time to course correct between now and then than to be the first part of November and getting these configurations the way that they need to be for wintertime. So when to combine, when to split. Megan, what I would say is that the difference really is if you are looking at a colony that is 5 or 6 frames of bees and they're queenless and they're just not kind of catching on, and you can't find a mated queen, I wouldn't even fool letting them make another queen. I would combine them with something else. And because you're looking at this, we have a hard time. We look at these boxes of bees, these colonies, and we look at the entire hive as the unit, as the asset. But truth be told, when you crack the lid and start looking at the frames, it's what's on the frames that are actually the asset for the wintertime. Sometimes it might be the queen and her laying, and it might be the brood. Sometimes it might be frames of pollen. It might be frames of honey. If we're in a situation where we're looking at 4 to 6 frames of bees that are queenless this time of year and we can't get a mated queen, you do the math. The equation leads to right now minus X amount of weeks until first frost equals way less bees. So what I'd like to do is move those assets to another colony who could use it, help jumpstart them and get them into a position where they're going to be really looking good for the wintertime. And what I really like to do, my favorite way to combine and make splits in a way, is to take all of these odd and end colonies that maybe they're 4 frames of bees, and I will take them all and start combining them with no respect to their orientation or anything. I will start jamming them and slamming them and putting them all together, and then break down all their homes where they came from. So they are forced to either stay in that spot or go integrate into another colony. Now I've got very deliberate, intentional, if you will, Bruce, colonies that are all queenless. I've just combined them. I've all given them a beautiful size colony. Now all they need is a queen. Now I go through, clean up the mating nukes, grab those queens, drop them in, and they're squared away. Worst case scenario, you might need some sealed brood just to refresh some of those bees. But so that's an entire episode. So thanks, Megan, for the question.
Hey, Greg, if you have, say, for example, you've just got 5 or 6 colonies, one of them's weak and one of them is strong, and the rest all, say you got 5 colonies, 3 are fine. You got 2 of them, one of them has 3 to 4 frames of bees, and you're worried about them for winter. The other one is reasonably strong, and you want to combine them. How do you manage that situation with the queens? How do you manage that situation? How do you actually, what's the process you use to combine those colonies?
A lot depends on what the configuration of the colonies, how strong the colonies are. Where on a lot of those, I may simply take a box that has no queen. That's 4 or 5 frames. This is just what I do. I'm not saying you should go do this, but if I go over to a box that's like, let's say, a story and a half, and I've got this box here that's like 3 to 5 frames, they're not quite catching on. There's no eggs. There's no larva. There's no queen. I'll take that box and I'll put it right on top of that other super, give them that super space between, smoke them heavy, and then walk away. I'll let them figure out their orientation. And if I come back in 3 days, guess what's going on in that top box? Nothing. It's just empty. They've all moved down. They've all figured it out. And I'm not going through digging One thing I hate to do is when you go from backyard to hobbyist to sideliner, to whatever scale that we found ourselves in here, whatever you want to call it, you start to figure out that you can't spend time going through every single frame and move every single frame into every single box and every single box to every little place. You end up doing bigger, bulker moves. And so I may take off a super that has the bees on it and just go throw it on top of another colony. I'll take these little weak rascals that are 3 and 4 frames. What do I have to lose? And if I put them on top of a double deep, I'm just really not of the mindset that 3 and 4 frames of bees that are queenless are somehow going to go in and wreak so much havoc in the strong colony and kill the queen. That's going to cause me a problem, especially if I put it over top of a super. They integrate, they figure it out, and they move on.
What do you do if it's queen right, but it just has a couple little patches of brood in there, and they're failing or spotty brood? You just kill the queen and then stick it up there as well. Same thing.
Well, because for me, when I get towards the end of the year, there is always that colony that is almost a single that doesn't have a queen.
Mm-hmm.
And so worst case scenario, I'll combine that weak one to that bigger one. And you can either put it on top, smoke them heavy. Most of the time in that situation there, I would value the queen over the 3 frames of bees. So I would take the queen, I'd cage her, and then introduce her to whatever colony that needs her, take those other 3 or 4 frames of bees, shake the bees off right into the ground, move those frames to something that could use it, let the bees figure it out. Because if they go in the front door and the hive accepts them, great. If they don't, they don't. They'll keep going until they do.
Okay.
Brian, let's get a couple more questions here before we cut loose for the night. I could spend all night talking about some of this stuff, but no one likes 4-hour bee chats, I guess. Or maybe you do. I just don't know what I do.
Some people
I don't like to sit. I just can't sit here that long. If you see me mute or stopping my camera, it's because I can't sit here this long, and I keep getting Charlie horses. So I got to turn my camera off and stand straight. I can't sit for more than an hour and a half or 2 hours. It just kills me. The question is from the Morris Homestead. Hey, do you guys have any experience with queen cages from Europe that have an opening tab for workers and a separate opening tab for the queen? Both openings with candy, ? I just bought a queen in one. Fellas, do you have any experience with
I have. No, I don't.
European queen cages?
Nope.
Brian? If only your mic wasn't mute. If your mic wasn't mute. What am I saying?
I'm sitting here talking away again like I've never done this before. No, I've never even seen one. So
yeah.
I don't even know where you would get one or who even uses them over here.
I tell you, Morris Homestead, would be the guy that would know. Go talk with Richard Knoll would probably know something about those European queen cages. I couldn't even tell you what they look like.
Or like Lawrence, Black Mountain Honey, any of the guys from across the pond. Yeah.
Good question, though.
Yeah.
What's
Marty
next,
Guy again?
Marty Guy asks, are you splitting and using mated? Are you only splitting and using mated queens? For me, absolutely. I am right now. Like I said, we are making queens, but we're down to making probably the last 100 queens of the year, and those are only for us to artificially inseminate. So really not looking to make any more open mated queens for our use. Not this late in the year. The return on that time investment is just so poor. However, to make the virgins to artificially inseminate them, however, is still very much worthwhile. So we are only making splits, downsizing splits, or splits at all this time of year using mated queens. I have no cells that are getting ready to emerge. Same thing for you, Brian?
Yep.
Yeah. Bruce, what about you?
I would say the same thing.
Yeah.
I would only use mated queens now for sure.
Steve Amos, I want to thank you for your super chat and also your continued weekly super chats. You've been a great supporter of all 3 of our channels in the Stream Team Beekeeping Chat. So, Steve, we appreciate you.
He had a question about double screen boards as well on there.
Okay. Oh, let's see. I look forward to every Wednesday. Thank you guys and all the chatters. always add to the toolbox. Does anyone use double screen boards? What you can't no, you can't see over here is we're also selling double screen boards now. We've used them for a little while, and they're fantastic. Not only for making splits, but for grafting and such. When we were doing all of our grafting and queen rearing, we're using them extensively. And then here in the next couple weeks, when I'm going through and making a lot of the last rounds of these splits, I will absolutely be using a double screen board in between there. For me, what I'll do is I'll put the queen on top over that double screen board, and everybody else, once the foragers and such, they'll leave that top part of that box. They'll find their home in the lower box. They'll be queenless, and then I'll simply just drop a queen inside of there. Gives you a lot of opportunities to not only make some easy splits, but also it's a great way to warm that colony above. So if you do find yourself in a situation where you do got, a 5-6 frame nuke, and you're just not quite sure you want to overwinter them in a 10 or a 5 frame single, you might consider putting them over a double screen board over a stronger colony to use the heat from the lower colony to help keep them warm. I know this year I'm going to be in a position where we are going to have a lot of singles that I don't want to overwinter in a 5 frame box, that I'll end up overwintering over top of 10 frame singles over top of double screen boards. So we've got a lot of double screen boards here at the shop built with HDO. If you're interested in double screen boards, they'll be on our website here at some point at nature'simagefarm.com, but you can always give me a call or shoot me an email, and we can try to put you in touch. I want to thank Dwayne Von Bargen for the $10 super chat. We really appreciate that. Me and Brian hitting the same buttons there.
Sounds like Dwayne is retiring tomorrow. Sounds good.
Awesome.
Let's see. I'm stuck on the starred comments there.
I did not have a good experience with pollination this past year. We had some issues with our broker, and really didn't. It was a very bad experience, and I'm probably not so much because of that, but I'm just going to move in a different direction this year. Who knows what the future holds, but I'm not going to do pollination this coming year. It was, the first 3 or 4 years were pretty good. This past year was awful. And I know that's not, but I was kind of leaning towards staying away from the pollination a little bit anyway. I just want to do some different things. And it's a lot of work when I don't want to be working. It's trying to build bees up down here when they're really not wanting to be built up. And I'm going to take a break from it this year, and then we'll reassess after I get through the coming year.
I think the pollination is, I will never, ever forget this, but talking to Chris Werner and him flat out saying, don't send any bees out to California that you can't afford to lose. And so it's one of the things where when it's good, but when it is bad, it's terrible. And I'm in no position to lose any of the bees that we're working and building. We are in growth mode. I hope to be in a position in the future where we don't need to keep growing bees, and we can send, if we wanted to, we could send a truckload of bees for a payday and not need them to come back. Whether or not I would still do that if I had it's a different story altogether, because that's a whole other conversation on something I probably don't want to get into tonight. Bruce, it's been interesting watching your journey with that, and if I probably speak for all of us, but we appreciate your transparency with that and just sharing that journey just as it is,
Well, I'm just so small time, but other people that went had a fine year. It was a rough year for a lot of people, but other people, got paid. This is what they were supposed to get paid.
And the bees got graded what they actually were, and they didn't get
so
scammed.
We had an issue with that type of thing. It wasn't so much. And it was just an issue. I can't really go into the details on it. So, we have people that took bees out of the same holding yard that did okay. And I think Lindsay, they sent some out of that same place, and I think they probably did okay as well. But we just had we just had a bad experience with our particular situation. So it's not across the board. I mean, it was a rough year in California this year, in Northern California, for the bees. I think that was kind of an across the board thing, but a lot of people did just fine and ended up doing okay. My bees came back. They were still in the boxes. It just took a while for them to regroup. But, it's a lot of work for what, for what happened to us. And it's just, I've been a little burned out on it. I'm not sending enough to really, it's a nice little paycheck, but it's not like I'm sending a whole truck, and it's been kind of fun, but it's just a lot of work to get them ready. If you're sending a whole truckload and, you're making the kind of money you can make, if everything works out, like you say, Greg, it's worth it. But, for the few colonies I send, it's just, maybe I could break out some splits and sell some nukes, and, per nuke, I'll make as much or more than I make on pollination, and I'll be able to keep them here and right. Be in control of my own bees and not have them out there with somebody else.
It's a game where you've got to have so many of those bees that you don't have any other tangible market for them, and you can afford for it to go down the road and take a risk, or eventually, if it works out well enough for you, even if you had a half a load, or you grow to a whole load or several, then maybe it does become part of your business plan and strategy. Yeah. But it's a little bit of a challenge.
I'm in a little different stage right now with my beekeeping. I'm trying to, if anything, I might be trying to scale down just a little and have a better quality bee, maybe not as many. That's kind of what I'm kind of going in that direction a little bit, because the work is just too much for what I'm trying to do right now. So I'm trying to get back down a few hives maybe, or stay where I'm at, or a little bit less, and then just have better quality what I've got, instead of just trying to grow and grow.
Yep. Great thoughts there, Bruce. A little earlier, we were talking, or the question was about the European queen cages. That bee man at Faith Apiaries says he's got some experience with those cages, and that the small door to the candy leads to a queen excluder size barrier. You need to use the larger opening to allow the queen to exit. So those sound pretty neat. I've never seen them, never used them. They sound complicated. So my first thing goes to I wonder how much those are per cage. So that bee man at Faith Apiaries, thanks for the follow up there. Looks like we got one last question for the night here, Bruce, from DC's Bees. DC's Bees asks, so I have a question for northern beekeepers. How many frames of brooding bees are you liking to see this time of year for a solid strength hive going into winter? Brian, what are you looking for this time of year for frames of brooding bees?
Like where mine are at now, they still have, it's been 2 or so weeks since I've looked at anything brood wise, and there were still several frames. And I pulled a frame out of one colony, and the whole bottom, probably third of the brood was all drone brood. So they're still brooded up almost like it's summer in a couple of the colonies. What I like to see this time of year, and we'll typically see that more moving into this fall flow, and then even after, is they'll start brooding down and they'll start backfilling in some of the brood area. So, but now I've got a couple colonies that are still, it looks like it's summertime, and you look and you're like, well, I'm going to use Bruce's word again, what are you jokers doing? So I don't want them so large going into the winter time, just because then you're concerned about, do they have enough stores? But I think right now, some of my colonies, they're at probably and this is just a guess, I'm thinking they're at 4 or 5 frames. It's smaller, as compared to middle of the summer when they're going hog wild, but they'll taper back to hardly nothing up here.
Yeah. Bruce, what do you look for this time of year for size?
I just like to see them strong still, having some brood in there, having some weight. And somebody asked earlier what my configuration is. I think it was Spirit of Toad. I've mentioned this, I think, before. I have all kinds of sizes of hives. My favorite is deep and medium. I don't like that because the frames aren't interchangeable, but I do like that. I think that's a really good size for a brood nest, or even going into winter, it works well. Double deep, anywhere from like a 5-frame nuke to a double deep, I like okay, just depending on what the bees fill up and what they like. But I just like to see, 4 or 5 frames of brood, and just almost like they kind of hold steady through this time of the year here for us. And they're going to have another little growth moment here when the fall flow hits. Typically they will. Depending on where you're at, if you're on cotton or things that bloom in late summer, they may maintain that brood nest. If you're on an area that doesn't have that, they kind of brood down until the fall flow will hit. And so it kind of changes depending on the area here. It's probably the same up there, but I like to see just a good straw. I like to crack the lid and see bees in there, in the top box. I just like to see plenty of bees and then be able to pick up the back of the hive and feel some weight. And if I see that, then I'm pretty happy with it. That's kind of just how I gauge it. I don't go through every colony. I don't get in them. I haven't been in them much at all in the last month or so, to be honest. Probably the last 3 to 4 weeks. I think the weekend of August 4th and 5th is when I really went through them, pretty much all of them for the last time. So it's been about 3 to 4 weeks.
I think bees are like any other livestock, but what really puts me in mind of cattle is that it takes them no time to lose the condition, but it takes a long time to build that condition back. If you're at the time of year where you crack a lid and you see a lot of bees, and then you go to lift the box and it's light, and then you start digging in there and you're not seeing any brood, that's a nightmare waiting to happen. And so what we're looking for is, for me, for configurations, is I want to see at least 3 frames of brood with pollen that's stored, some bread. I want to see some food storage. What I'm seeing right now, though, is we have been in. There's been a little bit coming in, but not enough to stimulate the queens. I'm kicking myself because I needed to have bucket feeders on 2 weeks ago. I didn't. And so now I've got some colonies that they are so in tune with the flow that it is lights out until there's flow coming on. Now they're going to get caught back up. They're going to be fine. It actually gives me a little bit of an opportunity to go in with some oxalic acid, because as they have slowed down and hit the brakes on brood rearing a little bit, it's going to give me an opportunity to get in and knock down phoretic mites. So you always have to look for the opportunities, even when you're right in the middle of a lost opportunity. I think there is always an opportunity within a lost opportunity to turn something around. And so that's what we're going to be doing, is taking a look at that. So that was a really good question. And as far as right size, there's some years we'll go in a 5-frame deep, and that's it. So you're talking about 2 frames of brood, some resources on the outside, and they cruise, let it rip, send it. But when you get into the 10-frame boxes, you got to be a little bit more intentional on the configuration of that and the size. One thing you can always do, though, is if you've got a 10-frame box that it's just a little late to the game, you didn't get them stimulated enough to lay, you feel like they're pretty clean and free of mites, and they're not quite cutting it in a 10-frame box, and you're not sure you want to have that big of a box for wintertime, no problem. Put them over a double screen board over a stronger 10-frame box. Give that a shot. And then if you're not comfortable trying that, you could downsize them to an 8-frame box or a 5-frame, whatever that you do have. But the more we grow, the more I'm trying to keep uniformity throughout. I'd rather use a double screen board to overwinter small colonies than to have so many 5-frame nuke boxes that are on bottom boards, that are on hive stands, that I've got to do this, I've got to do that. They're wind sails. I mean, it's just one thing after another. So that's a conversation for another day. I did want to say a shout out to Grammy's midwife, Suburban Homestead, Lisa Gowan. Just put out a video yesterday catching up on one of the queens that we had sent her. We sent her 2 queens. One was Hadassah from the swarm catch from her visit up here, and she's marked gold. She's a beautiful queen. That was a lot of fun, that entire storyline of us going out and fooling with the swarm and catching the swarm, and then catching the swarm of the swarm, and then seeing the queen in flight with the mating sign, with the endophallus and everything stuck in the queen. Caught that on camera, and so it's been fun to kind of follow that queen along. Now that queen is at her forever apiary down in Alabama there with Lisa Gowan, and we also sent her. We can't just send her one queen, so we had to send her another queen too. So we sent her one of the very first silver line Pepto Pinks, which is a fun hybrid of our Carney Caucasian lines that we're working on. And so the virgin queens are all marked silver, and then when they come back mated, they get a little pink pin dot, little bullseye right down there. So check out Lisa Gowan's Grammy Midwife Suburban Homestead YouTube channel, and check out what she's doing to keep bees down there in Alabama. Fellas, as we wrap it up here, we are already 15 minutes over. Oh, Brian's got a photo. Yep, there she is. Isn't she pretty? Awesome. Guys, let's go ahead and wrap it up. Let's go around the room here, and I swear I know your guys' names. Wow, you think it's time for bed yet? Us old timers can't get past the 2-hour stream before we're falling apart here. I think I'm going to get off here and go take my Metamucil and rub my BioFreeze on my neck and hit the sack. Get wild. Brian, what's coming up for Castle Hives in the next week?
Mm-hmm. Well, I need to get into all the colonies that I just put the queens in and just see how they're doing, finish up on that video. But next, I think each weekend now for the next 3 weeks, I've got bee stuff going on. I got a call the other day, and the one local club didn't quite have enough people signed up to help them at the fair. So we've got a big fair going on in the area, and they needed somebody that could help them, not like at their table and sell stuff, but they feel that I am knowledgeable enough that I can stand by their observation hive and answer questions. So I'm going to go out and this Saturday, a couple hours, I'll just be out helping out a local club. So that'll be fun. And then the following week, I've got a flea market that I'm going to do. It's a local flea market where I'm going to try and sell some of my honey. So next few weeks, it's just going to be between work and when I have time free, it's just going to be bees. So, getting boxes on them and making sure if I've got colonies that are really hitting this flow, just making sure they don't get honey bound, because we don't want any kind of like hiccup in their, their brood production now. So it's going to be fun. Next few weeks here are going to be fun. So a lot of bee stuff.
Awesome. Bruce, what's going on with you and Bruce's bees the next week or so?
Not a lot. This weekend, I plan on just kind of walking through the bee yard, seeing how they look, maybe trying to put some food out to them. I just got to go I'm going to do some quick assessments and just see if there's anything I need to do. But just kind of trying to stay out. I mean, football season kicks off this weekend for real. So, I got to be back in the house I got to be back at the house by whatever time those games start up on Saturday. But I do have a video coming out, probably going to be Friday evening or maybe Saturday. I made a purchase of a couple of machines, and it'll be kind of a fun video. It is kind of a review. It is a review. And so stay tuned. I think you'll enjoy it. It's just something I've been wanting to do for a while, and I'm not going to give it away, but y'all stay tuned.
Teaser.
I think you'll enjoy it. It's nothing. It's something that it is a way to make. I think it's a way to make a good profit margin on your honey sales. Probably the most effective way to make a profit margin on your honey sales, but it's a very tedious thing to do, but now I found a much better way to do it. So you'll see what happens. Some of you may guess what it is already, but
Bruce and his entire Cowan line coming to you next week.
I almost feel like I need a teaser or something, because Bruce is up there like, I got a video coming out. I'm not going to tell you what it is. And all night long, all Greg's been doing is showing these Propola pictures. And
I'm just impressed you guys have videos coming out. That's hard to do anymore, it seems.
Well, this has been several weeks coming, and another little teaser. Lisa did a similar video on a different product not long ago, so that may give you a little.
Don't give too much out. People are going to guess, Bruce. Come on, man.
Anyway, all right.
Awesome.
Well, I'm done.
We'll stay tuned there.
You might have some people guessing correctly in here, by the way.
All right.
I didn't want to give it away.
All right. Well, that's all I'm going to say.
The next week, we're going to be on whose channel?
Oops, down there, Ryan.
Ryan. Castle Hives next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Okay. What's going on here the next week or so is just Truth be told, I'm trying to get my head around it still. But I know we've got some drone semen to collect. We've got the last round of queens to make to inseminate. Brian loves it when I say that. You just look at him. We've got that going on. We've got a lot of great videos. I hope to be able to get out. I've got a great video with Shubu Raj at Two Rivers. I've got a great video with Dale McMahon at Apis Engineering. Crispin Givens also in that one. I've got content with Cayman, video with Dr. Marla Spivak. I've got a really fun video of our biggest nuke order that went out of here, and we're loading the truck up at night, and that was a lot of fun. That was a pretty fun experience. I got that one to come out, and then just tons and tons of interviews with guys like Greg Rogers and Ian Stepler, and the list goes on and on, that I just haven't had a time to put out all that to become. Nice. It's all going to be rolling out here. So a bunch, if we can get to it. I just enjoyed the fact that Brian and I, we could just have a little cruise, just go on the philosophical.
It was fun.
I truth be told, there's a lot of nuts and bolts videos out there. I think Bruce and Brian, you guys do a great job at doing that. Where my heart is and where my mind is at with these things is to kind of go down a little different approach with the videos. And I think that's what makes what we all do together special, because we all have a little different look, a little different way that we share beekeeping and kind of what it means to us. Lisa Gowan says, Greg, you need to send one of those hive butlers home with Kevin. Well, Lisa, send Kevin out this way. Kevin is up in, I think, the Delaware, Ohio area. And so we're happy to show him around. Other than that, guys, sorry that this chat has gone on so late, 2 hours and 20 minutes. I mean, that is like snooze fest range for us. But we really appreciate everyone who is tuned in live with us tonight. If you're checking the replay out later or listening to on the podcast feed, we really, truly just want to say thank you for all your support. You guys are awesome. You make all this thing happen. A lot of fun stuff coming up, including a little creators convergence. There's a lot of fun stuff, collaborations that you're going to see coming out here, rolling out in the future. And I just want to, again, say thanks for everything you guys do, Bruce and Brian, to support the stream team and all of our folks here who we collaborate with. We appreciate you guys. So until next time, I want to remind you to be the lighthouse and be the change you want to see in this world. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.